My name is Stacy, and I have dual degrees in film studies as well as Spanish, which especially comes into play today. I coined this as Woke Film Book Club because I am going through movies that I think the Trump administration would call woke or otherwise not want you to see. Today's pick is especially close to my heart. It is the 1984 drama film called El Norte. El Norte follows the story of a brother and sister from Guatemala who are actually the indigenous descendants of the Mayans as they make the decision that really isn't a decision. Their hand is forced to come into the United States to seek a better life. I know a lot of people are going to want to argue with me on that point, so let me just give you some background on Guatemala in the 1980s. If you were raised in the US and used the public school system, odds are you were not taught about a lot of world events, even those that we as the US played a very heavy hand in. So in the 1940s and 50s, the Guatemalan government was turning towards left-leaning politics. And the United States, having relative proximity to Guatemala and interest in their resources, orchestrated a coup d'etat and installed a puppet dictator who then passed down that dictatorship to dictator after him. This film takes place during the 80s as it was released in the 80s, and it begins in the country of Guatemala, which is home to this brother and sister. During this time, the Guatemalan military was in charge of the government, and they were very swift in disappearing and eliminating all adversaries. As you can see, by today, we have now been able to estimate that during this period in Guatemala, somewhere between 140 to 200,000 people were either killed or disappeared. This is technically regarded as a civil war between the Guatemalan military and the rebels within Guatemala. However, the majority of the violence and unalivings was at the hands of the government. Now, it's a common misconception that the Mayan people just magically up and disappeared. This is not true. Their descendants, however, were subject to a genocide during this period of time. Essentially, the rural natives were upset that their land was being taken from them, and they were forced to work on this land for very minimum wages. And they believed that it was their birthright to be able to own and manage this land on their own. Again, just to double down, you can see below, 93% of human rights abuses were done by the military, while an estimated 3% were committed by the guerrillas. I also want to say that this story was based on the director Gregory Nava's own life. These are our two main characters, brother and sister, Enrique and Rosa. Now, at the start of the story, these two, their father Arturo, is attempting to form a union among the coffee harvesters in that area. As a result of this, Arturo is assassinated by the government and Enrique finds his head hanging from a tree. When Enrique returns to the village, he finds that the military has come and picked up his mother, who was then effectively disappeared. So he and his sister go into hiding and are given some money by family friends to help them get into America. In one of the few conversations we see between Enrique and his father before he is murdered, Arturo tells his son that because of the class divide, people like them are only seen as a strong pair of hands and not as human beings. But in the United States, there's a chance because even the poor people have cars. So despite what they may want for themselves, this brother and sister essentially have no choice as refugees from a militant government. They have to get somewhere safe. The two are able to get into the United States initially, but they are picked up by ICE. However, they've picked up the slang from Mexican Spanish in order to convince the ICE agents that they only need to be sent back to Mexico and not Guatemala. They are then able to make a second successful attempt coming into the country with the help of a coyote through these tunnels. This comes into play later. So Rosa and Enrique get to work trying to find a way to make income in the United States. Of course, there's trouble at every turn because they are undocumented and need to stay away from authorities. Rosa becomes a personal housekeeper in the home of a wealthy person while Enrique finds success in serving. The two of them struggle to maintain the cultural significance of their home while adjusting to this new life and avoiding ICE. Unfortunately, jealousy comes into play from one of Enrique's opponents, if you will, at his job. ICE is called. He is able to evade being captured, but of course he can't go back to his job. As the film goes on, it becomes clear that Rosa has contracted some kind of illness we later find out is typhoid fever from the rats in the tunnel where they came through to the United States. And unfortunately, she does pass away. Now, Rosa's death is foreshadowed by this quote from the film. "In our own land, we have no home. They want to unalive us. In Mexico, there's only poverty. We can't make a home there either. And here in the North, we aren't accepted. When will we find a home, Enrique? Maybe when we die, we'll find a home." There's very few images of this online, and there's a lot of copyright issues, but if you choose to watch the film, which is available to stream on many different platforms, I'd love for you to take note of the circular or spiral imagery throughout the film that kind of shows where they try to make progress moving forward. Unfortunately, they just end up where they started out. The film ends with Enrique standing outside of a hardware store waiting for work because he can't go back to his old job and his sister's passed away, so he doesn't really have anything else to do. He can't go back to Guatemala where the government will take his life. He can't make a life in Mexico like they said, and the North doesn't want him. And as I said, the dominant theme is a spiral nature, how things seem to have progressed but unfortunately haven't at all. Enrique is picked up by a man who comes by in his truck and says that he needs a strong pair of hands. The final shot of the film goes back to one of the first shots in the film, which is their father's head hanging from a tree, which is a commonly interpreted symbol, especially in Latin culture, as sluicide. So it's never confirmed, but it is implied that Enrique also takes his own life because perhaps he wants to be with Rosa, hoping the afterlife is the one and only place that will accept them. Guatemala is not the only place where the United States orchestrated coups d'etats of the government and installed puppet dictatorships in order to stop the spread of leftism. This is a story of the falsehood of the American dream and how America actually has stretched its arms into other nations, ruining the quality of life there, and yet getting upset at the people seeking asylum in the very country that ruined their country. I will say, and it's probably already obvious from my summary, it is not a happy story, but I think it's one that is incredibly essential for us to learn about right now. If you're somebody who was raised to stigmatize immigrants as people who want to ruin the country of America, please know America ruined their country first.